They wanted me dead. Every single one of them. Hundreds of warriors, swords drawn, eyes full of hate, all screaming my name like it was a curse. Fang Yuan, hand over the spring autumn cicada and we'll make it quick. You killed thousands of people for that thing. Today you pay for it all. You humiliated me 300 years ago, destroyed my family, wiped out 9 generations. From that day, I swore I'd have your head. Yeah, all of that. Every single word directed at me personally. And me? I just stood there. Green robes torn to shreds, hair a mess, blood coming out of wounds I stopped counting. A pool of dark red had already formed under my feet. I'd been standing in it for 6 hours straight. 6 hours of enemies surrounding me and not one daring to move first. They were scared, even now. Even with an entire army behind them, they were scared of what I might do in my final seconds. Honestly, smart of them. The sun started going down, painting the mountain in deep orange. The kind of sunset people write poems about. I turned slowly toward it, and instantly hundreds of blades snapped into ready position. People took steps back, and I laughed. Not the laugh of a man losing his mind. A real laugh, deep and full, rising from somewhere in the chest that still had fight left in it. The sun sets above the blue mountain, the autumn moon with the wind of spring. Whether you succeed or fail, when you look back, there's nothing left. I said those words and felt something settle inside me. A kind of peace that's hard to explain unless you've lived through 500 years of absolutely everything this world can throw at you. 500 years. 2 lifetimes crammed into one skull. The first life, Earth. A regular scholar who stumbled into this world by accident and never found a way home. The second life, 300 years clawing upward as a demon. Then another 200, just to get to this mountain, this moment, this pool of my own blood. 500 years total. Did I regret any of it? Not even slightly. I made every choice with full knowledge of where it would lead. You don't walk the demonic path by accident. You don't walk the demonic path by accident. You choose it, eyes wide open, no illusions about what waits at the end. If the spring-autumn cicada worked, I'll be a demon in my next life too. The moment that thought crossed my mind, something exploded inside my chest. White light, heat, the entire world going silent and then nothing. Rain. Quiet, soft, spring rain against a window. I opened my eyes and I was standing in a child's room somewhere high on the side of a mountain, looking out at a village full of lanterns. My hands, small, pale, soft. I grabbed the windowsill and stared at those hands for a long moment, just letting the reality of it sink in through my skin. Gu Yue Village, 500 years ago. I said it out loud, just to hear it, just to test whether saying the words would make them feel less impossible. They didn't, but that was fine. The spring-autumn cicada, ranked 7th among the 10 great mystical Gu. I spent centuries cultivating it, used it once at the cost of my own life, and it actually worked. Rebirth, real rebirth. Back to the very beginning, back to the 15-year-old body I hadn't inhabited in half a millennium. I clenched those small, pale hands into fists and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. 500 years of memories. Every treasure location I'd ever heard of. Every genius I'd ever met or killed or watched rise and fall. Every great event of this era, stored in my head like a personal map. Every shortcut, every trap, every betrayal. All of it charted and ready. And this time, I knew every shortcut, every trap, every person who would betray me, every opportunity that others would walk right past without realizing what they'd missed. I knew the route. Let me be honest with myself, though, because 500 years of living taught me not to get reckless right after a lucky break. Memories get blurry. Details blur together across decades. And most importantly, right now I'm a 15-year-old boy with no cultivation, no aperture open, no power of any kind. A regular mountain boar could end my second life before it even starts. I need to be smart. I need to be fast. I need to use every resource available to me and waste absolutely nothing. The most important thing right now is tomorrow, the awakening ceremony. Let me tell you how this world works because you need to understand it to understand why any of this matters. In this world, certain people can become Gu masters. Not everyone, not even most people. Gu are creatures, thousands of species, living in the soil and bushes on the bodies of wild beasts. They carry the laws of heaven and earth inside them. Little containers of natural power that most people walk past their entire lives without seeing, without sensing, without knowing they were there at all. A Gu master is someone who has opened their primeval sea, an aperture inside their body, and uses their life force, their primeval essence, to refine and control these Go and simple concept, brutal execution. Talent is measured in 4 grades, D through A, and each grade is basically a different ceiling on your entire future, locked in at the moment of the awakening ceremony and never changing after that. D grade means you probably cap out around rank 2, good for the village, useful in a fight, forgotten by history. C grade gives you a shot at rank 3 if you're lucky and stubborn enough to bleed for it. B grade is when the clan starts paying real attention, future elder material. Rank 3 is your floor, rank 4 is possible with enough resources behind you. That's a good life by anyone's measure. An A grade? The entire clan machine goes crazy. Full resources, personal tutors, the best Gu, the best food, the best everything. Because an A grade talent can reach rank 5, and rank 5 changes what's possible for an entire bloodline. I know all this because I lived it, both sides of it. In my first run through this life, and yes, I'm calling it a first run now, I showed up to the awakening ceremony as the clan's biggest hope. Years of acting like a prodigy, poetry that made elders tear up, a reputation built so carefully that everyone, from the clan head down to the servants, whispered a grade when my name came up. Then I walked into that flower cave, waded through the spirit spring, and stopped at 27 steps. C grade. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard in either of my lives. This time, I already know it's coming. No shock, no grief, no standing in the cold river wondering how the world got so unfair so fast. I know the result. What I care about is what comes after. The door to my room opened softly, and a boy, thinner than me, shorter, same face, poked his head in. Fangjung, my twin brother, my younger brother. Big brother, why are you standing in the rain by the window? He had that careful look on him, the one that was always braced for coldness. In his experience, I was cold. That was fair. I'd maintained that cold front for years, deliberately, as armor against people who would have used warmth against me if I'd shown any. After 500 years, the armor had become the face. I couldn't fully remember what I looked like without it. He hovered in the doorway, waiting for me to say something or dismiss him. I saw the window wasn't closed, he continued carefully. Tomorrow's the awakening ceremony. It's late. Aunt and Uncle would worry if they knew you were still up. Aunt and Uncle. Right. I felt something inside me that wasn't quite contempt. More like tired recognition for people I'd already understood completely a very long time ago. Those two had raised us after our parents died in a clan mission when I was 3 years old. Left 2 orphans and a considerable inheritance. And the operative word in that sentence is inheritance. They weren't raising us out of love, they were managing their investment, keeping us functional and presentable until they could figure out the cleanest way to claim what our parents had left behind. In my first life, I didn't see it until it was too late. The younger me was smart enough to seem like a genius, but too inexperienced to recognize what was obvious. In this life, I see everything. Fangjung lowered his head the way he always did when I didn't respond fast enough. You can leave, I told him quietly. He flinched, not from the words, but from something in my eyes. 500 years will do that to a person's eyes. He said goodnight and closed the door quietly. I turned back to the rain. The night watchman's clappers echoed in the distance. I had plans to make. Here's what I was working with going into the ceremony. No cultivation, no power, no allies, and a talent grade I already knew would disappoint everyone watching. What I had was 500 years of memory and a plan. Not a complicated plan. Not yet. First move. Get through the ceremony without cracking under the weight of everyone's disappointment, the way the 15-year-old me almost did on that first run. Second move. Find the liquor worm. Let me explain why that matters more than anything else right now. In a couple of months, a heartbroken clan member is going to go wandering drunk outside the village walls. The wine on his breath attracts a liquor worm, a rare and precious go, and that worm leads him to a hidden underground cave. Inside that cave are the bones of the flower wine monk, a rank 5 demon, infamous, powerful, and dead for centuries. But his inheritance is still sitting there waiting. All his goo, all his techniques, all the knowledge he accumulated in a lifetime of being one of the most feared figures in the demonic world. In my first life, I heard about this discovery after the fact. Didn't know the location, missed it completely, and spent years paying the price for that gap. This time, I'm getting there first. I can't find the cave directly. Not yet. But the liquor worm I can attract. Wine is its weakness. Walk around with enough aged wine, and eventually it comes to you. That's why everyone thought I was falling apart after the ceremony. Wandering around at night, disheveled, wine jars in hand, looking like a man who'd given up on everything. I was hunting. Dawn broke on the morning of the awakening ceremony. Over 115-year-olds gathered in the square, and you could feel the nerves humming off the crowd like heat rising off stone in summer. This was the moment every kid in Guyue village had been thinking about for as long as they could remember. Who would show talent? Who would disappoint their family? Whose life was about to completely change? The academy elder, white beard, high spirits, the kind of man who'd given the same speech until it stopped meaning anything to him, led us underground. Down stone stairs, deeper and deeper, until the air changed. Cool, damp. And then suddenly, color. Everywhere. The underground cave opened up around us with stalactites dripping rainbow light off every surface, and the younger kids around me gasped out loud. I'd seen it before. Still beautiful. Didn't change what I was here to do. What mattered was further in. A river. 3 jang wide, glowing faint blue in the darkness, like someone had dissolved moonlight in the water. On the far bank, a sea of flowers. Moon orchids, blue and pink, crescent-shaped petals glowing softly from within, stretching back into the darkness as far as the light reached. Hundreds of thousands of them. This was the spirit spring. The foundation of Guyue village, the reason a clan settled on this remote mountain centuries ago. And somewhere in that flower sea, dormant and waiting, thousands of hope goo. Let me tell you the legend, because this is actually worth knowing. When the first human, Renzu, walked this world, he was prey. Hunted by ancient creatures called predicaments, with no claws, no armor, nothing but soft flesh and a heartbeat to his name. 3 goo came and offered him a deal. The first took his youth and gave him strength. The second took his prime years and gave him wisdom. But old age came, strength faded, wisdom dulled, and the other goo left. The predicaments surrounded him again, and the third goo, the smallest, dimmest of the 3, spoke up. I only need your heart. Just give me your heart. Renzu agreed, and that tiny dim light burst into something that sent every predicament screaming back into the darkness they had come from, defeated by the one thing they feared. Because they feared it above all other things. Hope. Those hope goo are still sleeping in these flowers, waiting for the right person to wake them. The distance you walk, that's your talent, that's your ceiling, that's the rest of your life. The elder called names one by one. First kid, 3 steps, no talent, face went white, life changed forever in the worst way. Second kid, 4 steps, same result. Then Guyue Mobe, tall, horse-faced, built like someone who'd been fighting since he could walk. I stepped forward and made it 36 steps. B grade. The hidden elders exhaled. Guya Chichen walked 36 steps too. Also B grade, or so it appeared. His grandfather, Elder Chi Lian, one of the two most powerful figures in the clan, practically crowed with pride from the shadows. I caught that and filed it away, because I knew something nobody else in that cave knew. Chichen was faking it. His real talent was C grade. Elder Chi Lian had manipulated the results, helped his grandson cheat, and had enough power to keep the truth buried for years. In my first life, by the time it was exposed, the damage was already done. This life? That information was currency. I wasn't spending it now. Too low status, too early. But I'd know exactly when the right moment came. The elder called my name. Gu Yue Fang Yuan. The cave went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the echo. Everyone had been waiting for this. I was the one they all knew. The prodigy, the poet, the genius. I stepped into the cold river, bone-deep cold, the kind that climbs into you immediately, and crossed to the opposite bank where the flower bed waited. The hope. Gu stirred immediately, little lights rising from the flowers and entering my body, gathering 3 inches below my navel where the aperture would form. The pressure pushed back against every step, like walking through thickening air, like the world itself was running a calculation on whether you deserved to go further. 24 steps, 25, 26, 27. Bang. Inside my body, not visible to anyone watching, the ball of light hit its limit and exploded. Energy flooded through me, pores sealing, spine going rigid, and then a slow, total release. Like unclenching a fist that I'd been holding closed for so long I'd forgotten what open felt like. Then silence. Then the aperture formed. When it passed, something had changed below my navel. An aperture, open. My primeval sea, green copper water, calm as glass, filling exactly 44% of that internal space. C grade. Exactly as I remembered. Exactly as expected. I turned around and walked back across the river. The silence from the crowd was a different kind of silence this time. Shocked, confused, deeply disappointed. The kind of quiet that follows when a story doesn't end the way everyone rehearsed it in their heads. What? Fang Yuan walked 27 steps? Only C grade? But he was supposed to be... Let them talk. I kept my face flat and my pace steady and thought about everything I already knew about what came next. Here's the thing about C grade talent. It's not nothing. I've seen what a C grade cultivator looks like with centuries of experience. Perfect information and absolutely zero wasted moves. I know exactly what's possible. I've already done it once. This time around, I'm not going to waste a single year on mistakes I've already made and paid for in full. Gu Yue Fang Zheng? No answer. Gu Yue Fang Zheng? My brother snapped out of wherever his head had gone, probably still processing my result, and scrambled forward, and promptly tripped face first into the river. The cave filled with laughter, not polite chuckles, the kind that bounces off stone walls and follows a person home. Fang Zheng thrashed in the shallow water, slipping every time he tried to stand, which only made the laughter worse. I was already on the bank. I watched for a moment, then walked back to the river's edge, grabbed him by the collar, and hauled him upright. He came up coughing, water everywhere, face burning red from the fall, and from the humiliation, and from whatever else had been sitting heavy in his chest all morning. Big brother, he started. Go on, I said quietly, just for him. The road ahead will be interesting. He stared at me like I'd said something in a language he didn't recognize. I was barely smiling, just the corners of the mouth, nothing dramatic. But he saw it. Something in his expression shifted, uncertain, like he was trying to solve a problem he didn't have the formula for. Then he turned and walked into the flower sea, still dripping, still embarrassed, staring at his feet, and not paying any attention to how far he was going. Neither was anyone else, until the Academy Elder's voice cracked through the cave. Oh my, a grade talent! 43 steps, the cave exploded. The clan elders who'd been watching from the shadows started shouting simultaneously, immediately arguing about who would get to claim this child for their family line. Elder Chi Lian. The Fang bloodline traces back to the Chi bloodline. Obviously, this boy comes under us. Elder Mo Chen, his lifelong rival. Over my dead body, you scheming old... The clan head cut both of them off with the kind of authority that ends arguments. He comes under me. Anyone with objections can deal with me directly. Fang Zheng stood in the middle of all this, completely soaked and stunned, water still dripping from his hair while the most powerful people in the village fought over him. The younger brother soaring up, the older brother fallen to earth. That's the story everyone would tell from that day forward. They weren't entirely wrong about what happened that day. They just didn't have access to the part of the story that actually mattered, and I had no intention of telling them. A week passed. I slept through every single class in the academy. Not because I was broken, because there was nothing in those lectures I hadn't known for 400 years. Let the elder think I was falling apart. That worked in my favor. While everyone's attention was fixed on Fang Zheng, the new star, the A-grade genius, the clan's great hope, nobody was watching me. And every night, without fail, I bought 2 jars of aged wine from the tavern and walked the village outskirts slowly. Along the tree line, the cave outcroppings, the hollow-sounding ground. The wine aroma drifted through the mountain air as I walked the tree lines, the cave outcroppings, the places where the ground felt soft and hollow underneath. Looking for a liquor worm, night after night, jar after jar. Because if I could find that worm before anyone else stumbled onto it by accident, I could refine it as my vital goo. the first goo that becomes permanently connected to a master's life. And that worm, once I had it, would lead me straight to the flower wine monk's inheritance, the real prize that nobody else in this village even knew to look for. The moonlight goo that the clan hands out is fine. It's their specialty, a decent foundation for any cultivator starting out, but fine and decent. Those are words for people who are playing this game for the first time with no information advantage. I am not one of those people. Then it rained. Mountain rain. Heavy, relentless, falling for 3 days straight and washing away every trace of wine scent I'd laid down. I stood at my window and accepted the setback without drama. Adjust, move forward. This is fine. While I waited for the rain to stop, I started on the moonlight goo I'd picked up from the Academy's goo room. Crescent-shaped, crystalline, light as paper in my palm, and the moment I began pushing primeval essence into it, it pushed back. Here's what refining feels like. Imagine pouring water into a container that's actively fighting to empty itself the moment you stop. You pour essence in, the goo resists, you push harder, your internal sea drops, you pause, absorb from a primeval stone to refill, then start again. After 30 minutes, 3/4 of my primeval sea was gone, and I'd covered maybe 1/12 of the moonlight goo's surface. And the moment I stopped pushing, the moonlight goo started expelling my essence right back out. 6 hours to fully undo what I'd spent 30 minutes building. That's the arithmetic of early cultivation. C-grade talent means 4% natural recovery per hour, not fast enough on its own to outpace the expulsion. I needed primeval stones to supplement, and stones were not something I had in abundance right now. I was never going to win the classroom competition for first to refine a vital goo. That prize was going to someone with better talent and deep family resources behind them. I didn't care. I had a different prize in mind entirely. A knock at the door. "Young Master Fang Yuan, it's me. 3 days of rain, I thought I'd bring you food and wine." Shen Kui, my aunt and uncle's eyes inside this house, dressed up in a servant's smile and plump with calculated intention. In my first life, she'd worked her way into my attention during the months when I thought I was going to be an A-grade genius. She was warming up to the investment. Now that the ceremony had come back C-grade, she was recalculating everything, hedging her bets, keeping options open, waiting to see how this new situation developed before committing. She came in smiling, set the food down, the wine, brushed against my arm twice that didn't need brushing against. "Young Master has been so stressed this servant was worried. Leave the food, you can go." A pause. The smile flickered, just for a second, just long enough for me to see the calculation running behind it, and then she composed herself and left without another word. I ate in silence and thought about Aunt and Uncle's next move. I already knew it because they'd run the same scheme on me in my first life. Set me up with a fabricated assault accusation using Shen Kui. Get me expelled from the family before my 16th birthday, when I'd gain the legal right to claim my parents' inheritance. That was the whole point. That expulsion would cut me off from my parents' inheritance, which is the whole point. The scheme is not complicated. It just works on someone who doesn't see it coming. I was seeing it coming from 500 years away. Let them prepare. Let them feel confident about the plan. The rain was lightning against the roof. Tomorrow night, I'd walk the outskirts again with wine in hand, hunting a worm that most people in this village didn't even know existed. The spring-autumn cicada sent me back here with nothing but memories. But memories, used correctly, are the most dangerous thing in any world. The sun sets above the blue mountain. Let it. I already know exactly what's waiting on the other side of every choice, every setback, every moment that looks like an ending. That's what 500 years buys you. If you've made it this far, drop a comment. Do you think C-grade talent with 500 years of knowledge beats a grade talent with a head start? Because I have very strong opinions on this. The rain stopped on the 4th morning. I know, because I was already awake when it happened. Lying on my bed, eyes open, listening to the rhythm change from a steady downpour to scattered drops to nothing. I got up, opened the window, and breathed in the mountain air. Clean, cold, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine and something faintly sweet underneath that most people wouldn't notice. I noticed. 500 years of experience sharpens the senses in ways that are hard to explain. You stop filtering out the world and start actually reading it. The village was just starting to stir, smoke from cooking fires, the distant sound of the night watchman doing his final round. Dawn still a thin line on the eastern ridge above the trees. Perfect. I pulled on my outer robe, picked up the wine jar Shen Kui had left the night before, still half full, still carrying that sharp, aged smell, and walked out of the house before anyone else was moving. The streets of Guyue village in the early morning are a different thing from the streets during the day. Quieter, darker at the edges, the tall bamboo and wood houses on their raised stilts throwing long shadows. I walked slowly. Not the walk of someone out for air. The deliberate, unhurried pace of someone covering ground with a purpose. The wine jar open in my hand, tilted slightly, letting the scent drift. Here's the thing about the liquor worm that most people don't understand. It doesn't just like wine. It is drawn to the specific combination of fermented grain aroma and human warmth. You can't just leave a jar out. You have to carry it. You have to be moving. The combination of your body heat and the wine smell creates something the worm finds irresistible, like a trail it physically cannot ignore. I knew this because the flower wine monk, the demon whose inheritance I was hunting, had used the same technique to attract and refine his own liquor worm 3 centuries ago. The flower wine monk was famous for a lot of things. Giant thief, rank 5 master, the man who killed our 4th clan head through a coward's ambush after begging for mercy on his knees. What people remembered less was that his entire cultivation foundation rested on the liquor worm. Every technique he developed, every power he accumulated, All of it built on top of that one vital goo. And now his bones were somewhere in a hidden cave under this mountain, with his goo and his notes and everything he'd spent a lifetime building just sitting there, waiting. I walked the tree line, then the cave outcroppings along the northern face of the mountain, then doubled back through the bamboo grove east of the village where the ground dipped slightly and moisture collected. Nothing appeared. The morning brightened slowly around me, birds moving through the spear bamboo, the mountain waking up while I kept searching. Birds started moving through the spear bamboo above me. A sparrow landed on a branch and tilted its head at the wine jar like it was genuinely considering the options. I gave it half an hour in the bamboo grove, then moved on. There were only so many places on Qingmao Mountain where the ground conditions favored a lickerworm's habitat, and I was working through them methodically. This is how you find things in this world. Not with dramatic flashes of inspiration, not with special powers, but with patience and information and the will to show up every single day. Not with special powers, with patience, information, and the willingness to show up every single day until the universe runs out of ways to say no. 500 years had taught me that more than anything else. Most people give up one step before the answer. I don't give up. I returned to the house as the rest of the family was waking up. Shen Kui was already in the kitchen. The smell of rice and pickled vegetables drifted out. Normal morning smells, normal morning sounds. Normal except for the fact that somewhere behind those normal smells, Aunt and Uncle were running calculations on how to take my inheritance and leave me with nothing. I sat down for breakfast without comment and thought about the two problems in front of me in order of urgency. Problem 1, the liquor worm. I had roughly 2 months before the heartbroken clan member I remembered from my previous life would stumble onto it by accident. 2 months to find it first. Problem 2, Aunt and Uncle's scheme. I had until my 16th birthday, nearly a year away, before they'd need to make their move. Plenty of time, but I couldn't afford to be caught off guard when they did. Both problems had solutions. Both solutions required patience. This was fine. Patience was possibly the one resource I had in limitless supply. After breakfast, I went back to the academy, not because the classes had anything to teach me, they didn't, but because being seen in class gave me cover. Unremarkable. Fading into the background. Exactly where I wanted to be. The academy elder gave his lesson on primeval essence circulation. Same lesson he'd given 100 times. Same words, same examples, same heavy sigh at the end when he looked at the C-grade students and tried to find something encouraging to say. I slept through most of it. When I was awake, I was thinking. Specifically, I was thinking about the competition to be first to refine a vital goo, the 20 primeval stone reward the academy elder had announced. I'd already decided I couldn't win it fairly. With C-grade talent and limited primeval stones, the math just didn't work in my favor. The natural recovery rate was too slow. The Moonlight Goo's resistance was too strong. Someone like my brother, with A-grade talent and the full resources of the clan head behind him, would get there first. But here's something I knew from my previous life that nobody in this room had figured out yet. The competition wasn't just about who finished first. The real competition was about who was watching when the first person finished. Because when someone succeeded, the whole room would turn to look, and I could use that moment. Because the moment someone succeeded in refining their vital goo, there would be a reaction, visible, physical, unmistakable, that the whole room would turn to look at. And while everyone was turning to look at the winner, I could be doing something else entirely. I filed that thought away and let the class wash over me. 3 days after the rain stopped, I found it. Or more precisely, it found me, which in the end amounts to exactly the same thing, and matters a great deal less than what came next. I was on my usual pre-dawn circuit, moving slowly through the section of forest where the trees grew thicker and bamboo roots broke through in long ridged lines, wine jar tilted slightly open. I felt it before I saw it. A faint, focused warmth pressing against the fabric of my boot near the left ankle, drawn by the wine smell and the body heat radiating downward. A sensation like something small and focused pressing very gently against the fabric of my boot, drawn in by the wine smell and the body heat radiating downward. I froze, completely still, controlled my breathing to the slow, even rhythm of someone half asleep. Then I looked down. There, on the toe of my left boot, a worm, maybe 3 centimeters long, translucent in the pre-dawn dark with a faint internal glow the color of aged grain wine. It pulsed slowly, twice, like a heartbeat. The liquor worm. I had found it, or it had found me, which amounted to the same thing. Now came the dangerous part. Goo are living creatures with will of their own. Grab at a liquor worm wrong, too fast, too aggressive, with too much hunger obvious in your hands, and it will flee instantly, burrowing into the earth before you can blink. I'd seen it happen to people with better reflexes than me. The worm's sensitivity to intention is almost supernatural. I breathed out slowly, cleared my mind the way I'd learned to in the first years of cultivation, back in my previous life, when I'd had nothing but time and stubbornness, and the need to get very good at something very quickly. Calm, no desire, no urgency, just the presence of someone with nowhere else to be, and no particular agenda about the small glowing creature on his boot. Then, with the deliberate slowness of someone moving through deep water, I lowered the wine jar toward the ground and let the scent concentrate, pulling the worm's attention away from me. The liquor worm's glow intensified slightly. It shifted its direction toward the jar, drawn by the stronger concentration of scent. And as it moved off my boot toward the wine, I set the jar down, opened my aperture, and extended a thin thread of primeval essence toward the worm. Refining a goo this way, in the open air, without any of the Academy's equipment or the proper controlled conditions, this was not something the Academy Elder had taught. It was not something most Rank 1 goo masters could even attempt, and it would have been impossible for someone without 5 centuries of cultivation memory stored behind their eyes. But I was not most Rank 1 goo masters. I was a 500-year-old demon reborn in a C-grade body. and I had refined enough goo in my previous life to know exactly how much force to use and exactly when to pull back. The thread of primeval essence touched the liquor worm, and the worm stiffened immediately, began its resistance, that ancient instinctive rejection of anything that tried to claim it. I pushed, gently but consistently, the way you press a door that's stuck, not trying to force it, just maintaining steady contact until the frame gives slightly and you feel the first small movement. The forest was completely silent around me. Even the birds had gone quiet. The thin pre-dawn light was just beginning to reach the treetops. And slowly, with the particular feeling of something vast and significant happening in a very small space, the liquor worm began to yield. It took 45 minutes. My primeval sea dropped to nearly empty twice during the process, and I had to stop and absorb from my last 2 primeval stone fragments to keep going. But I did not stop. I did not lose focus. Not once. Not for the 45 minutes it took. Not when my primeval sea dropped to empty the second time, and I had to stop and absorb from a stone fragment. When it was done, I felt the connection snap into place. That distinct internal click of a vital goo fully bonded, the liquor worm's will absorbed into mine, permanently linked to my aperture. I sat back against a tree root and let out a breath I'd been holding for most of 45 minutes. The liquor worm rested in my palm, still glowing that warm amber color, but calmer now. Domesticated. Mine. I looked at it for a long moment. This small, improbable creature had been the key to the flower wine monk's entire cultivation path, and now it was my vital goo, instead of the standard moonlight goo that every other student in the academy was still struggling to refine. I was already 3 moves ahead, and nobody knew it yet. Here's what the liquor worm actually does, because it's not immediately obvious why a demon lord would build his entire cultivation around a creature that smells like fermented grain. The liquor worm, when properly cultivated, produces a primeval essence that is richer, denser, and more powerful than what the same goo master could produce naturally. It enhances the quality of your internal power rather than just the quantity, and across a long enough cultivation journey, that difference in quality compounds into something enormous. Think of it like this. Most goo masters are working with the cultivation equivalent of tap water. The liquor worm upgrades you to something considerably stronger. Across decades and centuries of cultivation, the quality difference compounds into a gap that raw talent and hard work alone simply cannot close. The monk understood this from the beginning. More immediately useful, the liquor worm's secondary ability is that it can be used to attract other gunic-specific types of goo that are drawn to the fermentation and warmth signature it produces. The flower wine monk had used this secondary ability to build a goo collection that most rank 5 masters across the entire demonic world would have looked at with pure envy. And most immediately useful of all, the liquor worm was the key that opened the door to the flower wine monk's hidden cave. Because the cave entrance was sealed with a mechanism that responded only to the liquor worm's specific aura, a lock that the monk himself had designed, requiring the key he'd spent his life refining. I didn't know the exact location of the cave yet, but I now had the key. Finding the door was only a matter of time and legwork. I stood up, tucked the liquor worm safely away, and walked back toward the village with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd just done something nobody else in 1,000 miles could have done. The sun was coming up properly now. Golden light cutting through the spear bamboo in long diagonal lines. The mountain was waking up around me. Time to go pretend to be a depressed C-grade student for another day. The atmosphere in the academy had shifted by the time I got back, and I knew before anyone told me what had happened. Ready refined their vital goo. The news moved through the student population the way news always moves through a small community. In ripples, with slightly different details in each version, but the core fact unmistakable. Gu Yue Mo Bei, B-grade talent, deep family backing, grandfather who'd been watching the contest like a hawk from the moment it was announced. He'd stayed up through the night with a steady supply of primeval stones flowing from his grandfather's reserves, and he'd pushed the moonlight goo to completion just before dawn. 20 primeval stones for first place. His grandfather, Elder Mo Chen, was reportedly insufferable about it. Elder Chi Lian was reportedly furious. The clan head had reportedly smiled and said nothing, which in its own way was the most pointed response of all. I sat down in the corner of the classroom where I always sat and watched the energy in the room with the detached interest of someone observing fish in a pond. My classmates were rattled. Mobei's success had made the competition suddenly real in a way that abstract announcements don't. If he could do it, others would follow. The race was on. I noticed my brother, Fang Zheng, sitting in the front row, the honored position because, of course, with a particular expression on his face. Not jealous, not threatened. Something more focused than that. He was doing the math, calculating how fast his A-grade talent would let him close the gap, deciding on his strategy. And I could tell from the set of his jaw that he'd already decided to go through the night too. Smart kid. The wrong conclusion. Speed wasn't actually what mattered most here. But the intelligence behind it was genuine and worth noting. The wrong conclusion was thinking that speed was what mattered most here. Speed was what mattered for the 20 primeval stone prize. But the prize wasn't the point. The point was what kind of goo you refined. Everyone in that room was going to end up with a moonlight goo. That was the clan's choice for their students. Controlled, cultivated, predictable. And a moonlight goo is exactly what it sounds like. Decent light cultivation technique, solid foundation, nothing extraordinary. I was sitting in the corner of the same room with a liquor worm already bonded to my aperture, thinking about a rank 5 demon's hidden cave. The gap between those two situations was not small. The Academy Elder called the class to order and launched into a lesson about the properties of primeval essence at different cultivation ranks. I closed my eyes and let him talk. While he talked, I was doing something more useful, mapping the mountain in my memory, trying to pinpoint where the cave entrance might be. The clan member who'd found it in my previous life had followed the liquor worm as it fled deeper into the forest. The chase had gone east. I remember this clearly because east of Guyue village, the terrain folded into deep ravines where the only paths were made by animals, not people. In those ravines, hidden under years of accumulated leaf fall and root growth, was an entrance, small enough that a person would have to know exactly where to look, sealed well enough that it had stayed closed for centuries. I needed to find it before the rain made the forest impassable again, and I needed to do it without anyone noticing what I was looking for. 3 more days passed. Mobe was the winner of the first place prize, but by the end of those 3 days, 4 more students had successfully refined their moonlight goo, including, inevitably, my brother. Fang Zheng came out of his room on the morning of the 4th day after the ceremony, looking slightly hollow-eyed from the effort, but carrying himself differently. The A-grade talent had done what A-grade talent does. It had compressed what should have been a week of struggle into a single extended push. The academy elder gave him a nod of measured approval. Elder Mo Chen, who had been appointed as one of his tutors, was apparently waiting at the entrance of the academy before classes even started. The machinery of clan investment was already in motion. I watched all of this from the back of the classroom and thought, good. Every bit of attention focused on Fang Zheng was attention not focused on me. Every resource the clan poured into him was a resource they weren't wasting on trying to steer or control what I was doing. C-grade students are, by institutional design, not worth the best resources. We get the standard allocation, the standard guidance, and the standard expectations. We are not watched closely. This was the single greatest advantage my C-grade result had given me, and I intended to use it fully. On the 5th day after the ceremony, I finally found the cave entrance. It was exactly where the terrain logic pointed, in the second deepest ravine on the eastern face, under a rock overhang so old that the stone had taken on the exact color of the earth around it. Invisible if you weren't looking for it specifically, and impossible to find by accident because the rock face had been shaped to blend perfectly with the surrounding earth over 3 centuries. I stood at the entrance for a moment and let the liquor worm's aura extend outward, the way I'd spent the past few days practicing. The worm pulsed once against my aperture, warmly, like a recognition. The seal on the entrance responded, a faint blue shimmer across the stone face, lasting maybe 2 seconds, and then a section of what looked like solid rock simply shifted aside. I stepped in. The Flower Wine Monk's Cave was not what I had imagined, even accounting for the fact that I'd been building expectations about this place for weeks. I keyed everything. The first thing was the smell. Ancient, deep, a layer of dust underneath something that had once been rich and organic and was now just memory. The smell of a sealed space that hadn't been opened in 300 years. The second thing was the size. From outside, the entrance looked like it would lead to a small hollow, maybe large enough to sit in. Inside, the cave opened up into something the size of a large room, with a ceiling high enough that I couldn't see it clearly in the dim light filtering in from the entrance. The third thing, and this is the part that hit me before anything else registered clearly, was the presence. Even 3 centuries dead, the Flower Wine Monk had been a rank 5 master, and rank 5 masters leave traces, deep, layered, invisible but felt traces, in the spaces they inhabit for long periods. This cave had been his home for decades before his final battle. A heaviness in the air, a feeling of layered history pressing down from the walls, the sense that the space you were standing in had been shaped by someone of enormous power and enormous will. I stood still and let the space settle around me. Then I looked at the bones, and held that particular stillness that comes from looking at someone who was once the most dangerous person alive. He was in the center of the cave, still in the position he must have died in, seated, cross-legged, the way a cultivator sits to work. Even the bones had that specific quality of someone who died at peace with their circumstances rather than in pain or panic. He'd known he was dying. He'd sat down, crossed his legs, and let it happen. After that final battle with the 4th clan head, grievously wounded, far from anywhere he could get help, he'd come here, to his own hidden place, and finished. Scattered around him, the remnants of his goo. Most of them had dissipated over 3 centuries without a master to maintain them, but not all. The ones that had survived were the hardy ones, the ones that didn't need much to stay alive, the ones that had been fed well enough before his death that they still had reserves. I counted 7. 7 surviving goo in a rank 5 master's collection was a miracle of preservation. Most collections would have collapsed completely. The fact that any remained meant the monk had prepared for this possibility. He had left them here deliberately. This was an inheritance, a deliberate gift left for whoever was smart enough to find the door and skilled enough to open it. I crouched down and examined each one carefully, the way you examine a battlefield after the fighting is done. What's left? What's useful? What's dangerous? The most recognizable one was the liquor worm. Not the same individual as mine, a different one, older, much more deeply refined. The monk's own vital goo, still alive after 3 centuries because the bond between a vital goo and its master's aperture lingers long after death. When a master dies, the vital goo doesn't disappear immediately. It weakens, it fades, it loses the energy that kept it stable. But this process takes time, and the monk had fed his, aids. But it takes time. 300 years was a long time, and this one was barely alive. A faint pulse, irregular, like the last few beats of something winding down. I could absorb it. The knowledge and refinement the monk had poured into it over a lifetime would transfer to me. Not cleanly. Vital goo absorption is never clean. But enough to give me a foundation that no C-grade student had any right to possess. I made my decision in about 3 seconds. I extended my aperture outward, made careful contact with the fading vital goo, and began the absorption process. One of the most dangerous techniques available to a cultivator at my level, the absorption process. It resisted, not with a resistance of something fighting for its life, but with the resistance of something that had been shaped by a specific person and wasn't sure about being reshaped by someone else. I was patient. I was gentle. And when the process finished, I sat back and spent a moment processing what had just changed inside me. The monk's decades of refined knowledge, compressed and transferred. Not memories. Gu don't carry memories, but technique. The specific way he had learned to shape and direct his primeval essence. The particular approach to cultivation that had taken him from a young man with modest talent to a rank 5 master. Mine now, layered on top of my own 500 years of accumulated experience. I looked at the remaining 6 Gu and got to work. I spent 3 hours in that cave. When I came out, the afternoon sun was already angling low over the eastern ridge. I had 6 Gu in various states of refinement stowed safely in my aperture, the monk's refined liquor worm absorbed and integrated, and a mind full of new information that would take days to fully process. I also had his notes, not paper. Paper doesn't survive 3 centuries in an enclosed space, but the monk had carved directly into the cave wall. Dozens of lines of tight, precise script recording his insights about cultivation, his Gu, his techniques, and, most valuably, his observations about the world as it had been 300 years ago. I memorized everything carved into those walls. Every character, every observation, every technique notation. Another person would have needed weeks. I needed 1 hour.x to read and process. I did it in an hour. The way I'd learned to process dense information during the centuries when reading fast and thinking faster was the difference between staying alive and not. Walking back through the ravine toward the village paths, I was already sorting through everything I'd learned and thinking about what it changed and what it didn't. My cultivation base had shifted, not dramatically. I was still C grade, still a rank 1 Go master with a limited primeval C. The monk's knowledge didn't change the ceiling on my aperture. What it changed, fundamentally, was what I could do within that ceiling. The quality and efficiency of every technique, the depth of understanding I brought to each refinement. For the next several months, while every other student in the village worked from the standard curriculum with a standard Moonlight Gu, I would be working from 3 centuries of rank 5 insight. The gap between where I was and where every other student in Guyue village was standing that evening. That gap was not small, and it was not closable by talent grade alone. I walked back into the village as the cooking fires started up, 2 wine jars in hand for appearances, a liquor worm humming in my aperture, and a rank 5 demon's 3-century inheritance stored in my memory. Nobody looked at me twice on the walk home. C-grade student with nothing to offer, probably falling apart, definitely going to amount to nothing. That was the story. I was keeping it alive. Let them think so. If you're enjoying this story, drop a comment below, and if you want to see what Fang Yuan does with that inheritance next, you know what to do. The next few weeks moved in a rhythm that suited me perfectly. Days in the academy, nights searching or cultivating, nobody paying close attention to what I was actually doing. From the outside, I looked exactly like everyone expected. A C-grade student adjusting to disappointment, showing up to class out of habit, sleeping through lessons, drinking more than he should. From the inside, I was running calculations that no one else in Guyue village had the information to run. Every day was a step forward. Every night was 2 more. The 6 Gu I'd taken from the cave needed careful handling. They weren't all usable immediately. Some needed deeper refinement, some needed specific conditions that I couldn't create yet at rank 1. But I knew what each one was, what it did, and exactly when I would be able to use it properly, because this knowledge had been earned over 500 years, not stumbled onto by accident. That's the thing about having 500 years of experience in a 15-year-old body. The knowledge is all there. The capability catches up to it 1 layer at a time. I was also, quietly and systematically, handling the problem that strangled every low-talent cultivator in this world, the chronic shortage of primeval stones. Stones were currency here. They were cultivation fuel, and I had almost none because my aunt and uncle controlled the household finances, and the clan gave C-grade students the baseline allocation and nothing more. In my first life, this had been a genuine stranglehold. Limited stones meant slow cultivation. Slow cultivation meant falling further behind. And falling behind in this world had a particular flavor of irreversibility that I'd spent decades learning to hate. This life, I had advantages my first self hadn't. I knew where things were. I knew what was coming. And I knew which stones, specifically, were sitting unclaimed on Qingmao Mountain right now. The spirit spring that powered the awakening ceremony produced primeval stones as a byproduct, the clan's biggest cultivation resource, carefully managed and distributed. But the spring also had outflow channels, and in those channels, small deposits of raw stone accumulated over months and years. The clan knew about the main channels. They maintained and harvested them on a schedule. What they didn't know about were 3 secondary channels that had opened up in the past decade due to shifts in the mountain's underground geology. I knew about them because, in my previous life, a maintenance worker had discovered them 30 years from now, told his supervisor, and the supervisor had embezzled the find for personal use. The whole story had come out eventually, and I'd heard it in the same way I heard most minor local scandals, as background noise, half remembered and stored without knowing I'd need it. Now I needed it. I found the first secondary channel 10 days after returning from the cave, in the north face service tunnel 40 minutes in, seeping through a crack in the rock wall, NG from the cave. It was in the north face service tunnel, a narrow passage the clan maintenance crew used for inspecting the Spirit Spring's underground structures. The channel was small, barely a finger's width, seeping through a crack in the rock wall, roughly 40 minutes into the tunnel from the entrance. Over the past several years, enough had accumulated in the basin at the base of that crack to represent about 200 primeval stones worth of raw material. Not refined, not cut, raw stone crystals that would need processing before they could be absorbed or traded. I collected what I could carry in a single visit. I spent 3 evenings processing crystals in my room using a technique not in any academy curriculum, a method that extracted usable energy directly, skipping the standard cutting and polishing process. Less efficient than proper processing, but faster, quieter, and invisible to anyone who might wonder how a C-grade orphan was suddenly cultivating at a pace that didn't match his official resource allocation. I found the second channel a week later, tucked into a drainage alcove the maintenance crews walked past without looking down. The third came 2 weeks after that, further east. Combined, the 3 channels gave me enough working capital to make the next phase of my plan viable. Not rich, not even close, but operational. Moving. By this point, a month had passed since the awakening ceremony. In that month, the rankings among my classmates had shifted considerably. The obvious names had pulled ahead. Fang Zheng leading everyone, accelerating through early rank 1 with the clan head support, Elder Mo Chen's guidance, and a new tutor appearing nearly every week. Gu Yue Mo Bei was close behind, solid and steady. B-grade talent doing exactly what B-grade talent is supposed to do. Gu Yue Qichen was keeping pace, which was interesting because Qichen's actual talent should have had him trailing Mo Bei by a visible margin. His grandfather was compensating, obviously. But only I knew that was what was happening. At the bottom of the class, by every visible metric, was me, which was fine, which was exactly where I needed to be. Let me explain something about cultivation advancement that the Academy curriculum gets slightly wrong. It teaches advancement as a linear process. You accumulate primeval essence, you hit a threshold, you break through to the next level. Slow and steady, methodical. What it doesn't teach is that the quality of your foundational understanding has a multiplying effect on everything that comes after. A cultivator with perfect foundational comprehension will advance more efficiently at every critical threshold than someone who raced through early stages without truly understanding what they were doing. The Flower Wine Monk's notes had given me that perfect comprehension. Not as concepts I had to learn, but as practical understanding I could feel in the way my primeval essence moved when I directed it. I was cultivating at what looked like a crawl. I was actually laying a foundation that would let me move faster at every subsequent stage than anyone watching me would think possible. Patience. This was just patience. The problem with patience is that the world doesn't always have the same schedule you do. About 6 weeks after the awakening ceremony, the situation with aunt and uncle moved faster than I'd expected. I came home one evening after a long circuit of the mountain service tunnels to find Shen Xui waiting outside my door with an expression I recognized immediately. Nervous, overperforming, too bright in the eyes. She'd been given new instructions. "Young master, you haven't eaten since this morning," she said, stepping slightly too close. "I made your favorite dish myself. Come inside and eat while it's warm." I looked at her for exactly 2 seconds. Then I said, "Leave it at the door," and walked past her. She tried 3 more approaches over the following week, each one slightly more forward than the last, each one deployed at a time when my aunt or uncle's footsteps could be heard somewhere nearby, close enough to respond to a shout, not close enough to seem obvious. The setup was in motion. They were building toward a moment, watching for an opportunity where they could catch me in a situation that looked bad enough to justify expulsion from the family records. In my previous life, I'd walked into that trap completely blind. A night when I'd had too much wine, Shen Kui appearing, raised voices, my aunt and uncle arriving at exactly the right moment. I'd been expelled from the household records before I was even sober enough to understand what was happening or form a coherent response to the accusations being made in that room. Understand what was happening. The inheritance, my parents' actual legacy, had stayed with them. Every primeval stone, every piece of property, every go my parents had accumulated over their careers as clan members. Gone. And I'd spent the next 2 years cultivating on scraps. This time, I watched the setup developing and felt nothing about it except mild professional interest. They were running the same scheme because the same scheme had worked before, and people with working schemes rarely get creative. The interesting question wasn't whether they would make their move. They would. The interesting question was what I wanted to do about it. Option 1, do nothing and wait for my 16th birthday, at which point I could legally claim the inheritance regardless of household registration status. The risk was that they found a way to complicate the legal process or move the assets somewhere harder to claim. Option 2, expose the scheme preemptively. Go to the clan elders, lay out the situation, make the setup impossible to execute. This would work, but it would cost me whatever relationship remained with my aunt and uncle and make me a known quantity in the clan's internal politics before I was ready. Option 3, let the scheme play out, but on my terms. Control what they thought they saw. Make sure the moment they chose to spring the trap was a moment I was prepared for. Turn their plan into something that ended very differently than they intended. I spent 2 days thinking about option 3. By the end of the second day, I was smiling. Option 3 it was. The trap came on a night when the moon was full. Of course it did. People with dramatic instincts always choose full moons. I'd known it was coming for 48 hours. The signals had been building, my uncle making a show of going to bed early, my aunt loudly mentioning that she had a headache and would sleep through any disturbance, the household staff vanishing one by one to their quarters before sundown. Shen Kui's footsteps outside my door, too regular, too present. I let it all play out. Sat in my room, cultivating, watching the preparations happen around me with the serene detachment of someone who knows how the story ends. When Shen Kui knocked at my door just past the second night watch, I was ready. She came in with wine. That was a nice touch, using my known habit as the delivery mechanism. She set it on the table, made a show of pouring 2 cups, and then turned to me with that specific expression she'd been practicing for weeks. "Young master looks tired," she said softly. "This servant thought perhaps some company tonight would help." I looked at her and felt absolutely nothing. "Sit down," I said quietly, "over there by the window." She hesitated. This was not the direction the script had given her, but she sat, watching me with careful eyes, not in the script, but she sat. "I'm going to tell you something," I said, keeping my voice at the same flat tone I always used, "and I want you to listen carefully because I'll only say it once." I picked up the wine cup and took a slow sip. letting the silence settle and expand in the room until it had done the work that talking often can't. I know what my aunt and uncle have planned. I know your role in it. I know the timing they're working with and the exact outcome they're expecting. I set the cup down. I've known for a month. Shen-Kui had gone very still. The performance had dropped entirely. Underneath it was a young woman who was genuinely scared and trying hard not to show it. Here is what's going to happen instead, I continued calmly. You're going to walk out of this room, tell my aunt and uncle I was asleep, and that tonight is nothing. Just nothing. And Kay out of this room right now. You're going to tell my aunt and uncle that I was asleep when you arrived, that you didn't want to wake me, and that you'll try again another time. And that's what tonight is going to be. Nothing. She stared at me. Young master, The alternative, I said, cutting her off gently, is that I go to the clan elders tomorrow morning with a very detailed account of this scheme. Your mother's position in this household depends on my aunt and uncle's standing in the clan. If their standing drops, your family's position drops with it. She understood. I could see it clearly in the way her hands tightened in her lap, the calculation running behind her eyes, arriving at the same conclusion I'd already mapped out for her. Go, I said. She went. I sat in my room and finished the wine. It was actually good wine, I'd give them that, and listened to the quiet sounds of a trap that had just misfired drifting through the walls of the house. 3 days later, my uncle summoned me to the sitting room, wearing his most formal expression, the one he put on when he wanted to project magnanimous authority without revealing the effort it cost him. He was wearing his most formal expression, the one he put on when he wanted to project authority and dignity, the face of a man who had decided to be magnanimous. It sat on him like a costume. Fang Yuan, he said, folding his hands on the table, your aunt and I have been discussing your situation. I sat down across from him and waited. You're 15 now. You've started your cultivation path. These are important years. He paused, clearly waiting for me to fill the silence with something grateful. I didn't. We want to support you. The academy allocation is not much for a student at your stage, and your aunt and I have resources we could redirect toward your cultivation. We want to see you advance properly. A direct toward your advancement. He was recalibrating. The scheme had failed, and now he was trying a different approach. Generosity as a pressure tool, gifts that created obligation. In my first life, this version of my uncle had also appeared after failed manipulation. The shift from threat to bribery was so predictable it was almost comfortable. I appreciate the thought, I said. I don't need additional resources right now. My uncle blinked. This was also not in the script. The cultivation path requires stones, Fang Yuan, without a solid foundation. I'm managing, I said. A pause. He tried again. Your brother has been showing remarkable progress. The clan is very pleased. For family reasons, it would reflect well on all of us if your own path also moved forward. There it was. The comparison. The comparison. Always the same comparison. The one that had been a blade in my chest in my first life, inserted every time someone needed me to feel inadequate. I felt the old familiar pull of it, the thing that had twisted in my chest like a blade in my previous life every time someone put Fang Zheng beside me and waited for me to feel small. It was impressive how automatic that reaction still was, even after 500 years. Then I felt it release, just as automatically. My path is moving forward, I said, at the pace that's appropriate for my circumstances. I stood up. Was there anything else? My uncle looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something between frustration and something that might, under other circumstances, have been respect. No, he said, that's all. That evening I sat on the roof of the second floor and looked out over Qingmao Mountain as the last light left the ridge, and the village below settled into its nighttime sounds. Jimao Mountain. The village lights were coming on below, smoke from the cooking fires drifting up the slope, the sound of the stream on the northern face just barely audible from this height. In my previous life, these weeks after the awakening ceremony had been some of the worst of my existence. The weight of everyone's disappointment, the sudden coldness from my aunt and uncle, my brother's transformation from shadow to star happening in real time while I watched from the bottom of the same hole we'd both started in. I'd cultivated on sheer anger for most of that period, burning through whatever scraps of resources I had access to, driving forward without proper technique, making fundamental errors that took years to correct. This time, I sat on a roof watching the mountain lights come on, with a rank 5 demon's inheritance in my memory, 3 secret spirit channels feeding my cultivation, and 18 months of history already mapped. The anger wasn't there this time, or rather, it was there, but it was clean, directed. The kind of anger that is useful rather than destructive, the kind that clarifies rather than blinds. I thought about what I actually needed to accomplish before leaving Qingmao Mountain. First, rank 3 Gu Master. That was the minimum for independent travel. Below rank 3, the mountain was genuinely dangerous, not in theory, not in the abstract, but in the very real sense that things lived out there that would find a rank 1 cultivator about as challenging as breakfast. Second, the inheritance. My parents' legacy, currently sitting in a storage facility under my aunt and uncle's nominal control, I had legal claim to it at 16. I needed to be in a strong enough position at 16 that the claim couldn't be contested, delayed, or quietly stripped. Third, whatever I could learn or acquire during the months between now and then that would give me advantages once I left this mountain. The Flower Wine Monk's Cave had been a significant find, but Qingmao Mountain had other secrets, and I had the memory to know where most of them were and exactly what kind of patience was required to reach each one in the right order. Most of them were. 1 year. That was my timeline. 1 year to build everything I needed to start moving at the speed this world actually required. I stretched out on the roof and looked at the stars coming out above the mountain ridge. Somewhere out there, in the wider world beyond Qingmao, the history I remembered was unfolding on schedule. Geniuses I'd known were children right now. Disasters I'd survived were still decades away. Enemies who would eventually want me dead were going about their lives with no idea I existed yet. All of that was still ahead. All of that was still manageable. For now, a C-grade student sitting on a roof, running calculations about a world that thought it already knew what kind of person he was. Let them think so. The weeks that followed settled into something close to routine, but routine is the wrong word for it, because each week was also moving me measurably forward. I cultivated every morning before dawn using the monk's technique, pushing my essence circulation to its efficient limit, not faster than the aperture could handle, but cleaner, with less waste per cycle. I attended the Academy's classes and slept through most of them, which served the double purpose of maintaining my cover and genuinely resting a body that was working hard every day it wasn't in that classroom. I continued collecting from the 3 secondary channels on a rotation that kept each one productive without depleting any of them. And I continued making careful use of the cave, returning twice more over the following month to extract additional materials and double-check my memorization of the wall carvings. The Academy's rhythm continued around me, Mobei advancing steadily, Chi-Chen keeping up with his grandfather's invisible support, the rest of the class sorting itself into the expected hierarchy, and Fang Zheng, my brother, my twin, the other half of a pair that the world had decided were on opposite ends of a spectrum, rising faster than anyone else in the class. He was genuinely talented. A grade talent is not just a number. It shows up in 100 small ways. The speed of comprehension, the efficiency of essence circulation, the way cultivation insights seem to arrive naturally rather than requiring the painful extraction process that lower grades go through. I watched him from the back of the classroom with the detachment I'd learned to maintain and thought about what he was becoming and what that would eventually mean. In my previous life, his talent had eventually curled inward into something ugly. The particular bitterness that develops when someone spends years in a shadow and then steps into the light. Ugly. The reversal, then the intoxication of being watched, then the old resentment finding new expression. It had produced a bitterness that came out as deliberate cruelty toward the one who'd made him feel small. Toward me. I did not particularly blame him for that. I understood it. I'd had 500 years to understand exactly how circumstances shape character, and his circumstances had not been kind. But understanding doesn't mean ignoring, and in this life, I was not planning to sit still while that particular history repeated itself. The question was how to change the conditions that produced it, not with sentimentality. I had no illusions about the transformative power of brotherly warmth, but practically, structurally. If Fang Zheng never had the experience of emerging from my shadow in a way that felt like revenge, the particular bitterness that drove his worst choices might not develop in the same way. The simplest version of that change was structural rather than emotional. Leave this mountain before he reached the point where having me around felt like a threat he needed to remove. I was already planning to do that. The timeline I'd laid out, rank 3, inheritance claimed, mountain left behind, had always been about getting myself out of this cage as fast as possible. The fact that it might also change what my brother became was a secondary benefit, or maybe it was more than secondary. I turned that question over a few times and didn't arrive at a clean answer. Some things take longer than a month of rooftop thinking to reach a clean answer about. I put the question down and let it sit in the back of my mind where unsolved things wait. 2 months after the ceremony, the monthly assessment arrived on schedule, the formal check that determined each student's resource allocation for the month ahead. The clan held its monthly assessment, a formal check of each student's progress, conducted by the Academy elders with results recorded and used to set the following month's resource allocation. For most students, this was routine administration. Show up, demonstrate progress, receive your allocation, and get on with the month. In my previous life, these had been quiet humiliations. Bottom of the rankings, watching resources flow upward, receiving the allocation that said the clan hadn't quite given up on you yet. This time, I was approaching it differently. I was not going to show everything I had. That would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. But I was going to show enough to rise from the absolute bottom, because sitting at the floor attracted a specific kind of watching that was more inconvenient than quiet, unremarkable mediocrity. People at the very bottom get watched with a particular expression. Not quite pity, not quite contempt. A kind of waiting, like everyone is just seeing how long it takes for the obvious conclusion to arrive. That expression from the elders was starting to become a minor inconvenience. I needed to be slightly better than nothing without being interesting enough to examine closely. The assessment had 3 parts. Demonstrate primeval essence circulation before the examining elder, hold a goo activation for 30 seconds, then submit to direct aperture examination by the elder's extended sense. I had prepared carefully for the aperture examination specifically, because that was the part where a close look could reveal things I needed to keep concealed for several more months at minimum. An elder's primeval sense at close range could detect bonded goo, the quality of essence circulation, and the depth of foundational understanding. Everything I needed to keep carefully out of sight. The liquor worm needed to stay completely hidden. The 6 cave goo needed to stay hidden. The quality of my circulation needed to read as ordinary modest progress, nothing more. And the quality of my circulation, shaped by the monk's technique, needed to look like the ordinary, slightly better than expected work of a C-grade student who had been applying himself modestly. I had spent 2 weeks practicing how to perform mediocrity convincingly. This was, in its own way, the most demanding cultivation exercise I'd done since the rebirth. When my name was called, I stepped forward and performed everything exactly as rehearsed. 2 weeks of practicing how to make exceptional cultivation look like unremarkable effort. Prepared, exactly as planned. The elder examined me, made a small note, and moved on to the next student with the expression of someone who had found nothing unexpected. The result posted the following morning. Fang Yuan, C grade, cultivation rank 1 upper stage, resource allocation increased by 12% from the previous month. Upper stage. Genuine progress, visible but unremarkable. consistent with a student who had stopped moping and started working. Nothing to investigate further. I read the posted results and felt the quiet, specific satisfaction that only comes from a plan executing exactly as designed, without variation, without improvisation, without luck. Uding cleanly. My brother's result was posted directly above mine. Rank 2, early stage, 2 months after the ceremony. The speed was remarkable even by A-grade standards. The elder's comments noted exceptional foundational comprehension and recommended accelerating his training schedule. The gap between us, on paper, was wide. On paper, that was exactly where I needed it to be. If you've made it to the end of this part, drop a comment telling me who you think will be more dangerous 2 years from now. And if you want to see what Fang Yuan does with everything he's been building, you already know what button to press. 3 months after the awakening ceremony. The mountain had shifted from early spring into something warmer, the spear bamboo putting out new growth at the tips, the forest floor changing color week by week. I had changed too, in ways that didn't show on the surface and weren't supposed to. My cultivation had cleared the threshold into rank 2 during the 5th week. I'd done it quietly, in my room, at 4 in.the.morning, when the only witness was the liquor worm pulsing in my aperture like a second heartbeat. No ceremony, no notification to the academy, no entry in any register that I controlled. Just a private threshold crossed and filed away with everything else I was keeping private. In the official records, I was still rank 1, upper stage, the modest improvement I'd shown at the monthly assessment, progressing at the pace a C-grade student with slightly more effort than average would progress. Steady, unremarkable, invisible. The gap between my official record and my actual cultivation was something I needed to manage carefully. Too much divergence and the monthly assessment would flag anomalies. I needed to plan my official progression, the version the elders would see, in a way that was plausible but never impressive. That was the arithmetic I was running constantly in the background. How fast can I actually go? How fast can I appear to go? What's the maximum sustainable gap between those two numbers before someone pays closer attention? The answer, I had calculated, was roughly 2 stages. I could stay 2 full stages ahead of my official record without triggering enough discrepancy to draw investigation, as long as I was careful about the energy signatures I showed during assessments. 2 stages of hidden advancement. That was my operational buffer, and I was using every bit of it, running my real cultivation 2 full ranks ahead of anything the records showed. Every bit of it. The situation with aunt and uncle had settled into something I'd call a cold truce. After the failed scheme with Shen Kui, they hadn't tried anything direct. Instead, they'd shifted to a subtler approach, managing the household resources in ways that made my daily life slightly more inconvenient without being actionable. Smaller portions at meals, the room left slightly colder in the evenings, small delays in anything I requested from the household staff, always with a plausible explanation. It was the kind of low-level pressure that worked extremely well on someone who was already struggling emotionally and practically. In my first life, it had ground me down steadily, contributing to the general sense of being unwanted and on borrowed time. This time, I barely noticed it. My cultivation didn't depend on household meals. I had my own resource channels. The cold room was handled with the monk's internal heat circulation technique, a pleasant side benefit of a method developed by someone who had clearly spent too much time in damp caves. What I was watching instead was a different clock. My 16th birthday was 7 months away. The legal threshold for inheritance claims under Gu Yue clan law. The date that everything I'd spent 7 months building was working toward. The legal threshold that would finally make my parents' resources mine to direct. 7 months. Enough time to reach rank 3, which was my cultivation target before I left this mountain. Enough time to establish documentation of the inheritance claim that couldn't be quietly buried. Enough time to prepare for whatever my aunt and uncle tried when they realized the birthday was approaching and their window was closing. I was not worried. I was planning. There's a difference between those two states that took me about 200 years to fully understand. Worry is diffuse. It spreads across everything and makes all of it slightly worse. Planning is focused. It takes energy and turns it into movement. Same underlying concern, completely different result. I had stopped worrying about most things somewhere in my 3rd century. It turned out to be one of the more useful changes 500 years made to a person. 4 months in, the academy curriculum shifted into its intermediate phase. New Gu introduced, combination techniques added to the coursework, field exercises outside the village announced. New Gu were introduced. The basics of Gu combination, using multiple Gu together to produce effects neither could achieve alone, became part of the formal coursework. Field exercises outside the village were announced for the following month, supervised trips into the lower sections of Qing Mao Mountain to encounter real wild Gu and low-level spirit beasts. This was when the actual gap between students started to become visible in a different way. Theory is one thing. Textbook cultivation exercises in a controlled environment are one thing, but the moment you put young Gu masters into actual field conditions, the differences in preparation, temperament, and foundational depth start showing up immediately. Gu Yue Mobei had B-grade talent and had been trained by his grandfather, himself an elder with decades of field experience. He moved through this practice exercises with the easy confidence of someone who had heard these lessons before and taken them seriously. My brother Fangzheng was something else entirely. In a classroom, a grade talent looks like fast progress on paper. In the field, it looks like a different order of perception. He felt Gu movement before the elder pointed it out. He responded to sudden changes faster than his training could account for. He was already operating partially on instinct, which meant the talent was beginning to express itself beyond what deliberate cultivation produced. I watched all of this from my usual position at the back, contributing exactly as much as a C-grade student with modest but genuine effort was expected to contribute. Which was enough. Not impressive, enough. What I was actually doing during these field exercises was cataloging. Every Gu species present in the lower mountain terrain, Every spirit beast territory and its rough boundaries, every piece of information that would be useful when I was moving through this mountain without a supervising elder and without any expectation of backup. That time was coming. The cave had more to offer than what I'd collected in my first visit, and I needed to return once the mountain conditions were right for what I was planning to take next. In the 5th month, Gu Yue Chi Chen made his first serious mistake. I'd been waiting for it, the way you wait for rain when you can read the clouds. Chi Chen's actual talent was C grade. His apparent talent, the B grade result his grandfather had manufactured, required constant maintenance. Every time he was assessed, his grandfather applied something subtle in the background. Every time Chi Chen showed cultivation results that didn't match his real capacity, another intervention was required to explain the gap. The structure was becoming dangerously complex. Why the gap required explanation. The problem with maintained deception at this scale is that it compounds. Each intervention creates a new inconsistency that requires another intervention to cover. Eventually, the structure becomes complex enough that one unforeseen variable collapses everything. The unforeseen variable, in Chi Chen's case, was a field exercise that went slightly off script. The elder in charge of the exercise sent a small group, Chi Chen, Mobe, and 3 others, including me, ahead to scout a section of terrain while the main group held position. Standard practice for intermediate field training. The idea was to let the stronger students move with some independence while the elder maintained observation from a distance. What happened in that section of terrain was a mid-level spirit beast that the elder's advanced survey had classified as dormant. It wasn't dormant. The beast had moved position overnight, settling into exactly the ground our scout group was moving through, which is the kind of bad timing that happens in field conditions regardless of preparation. The beast was a scale-ridge python, stage 3 cultivator equivalent in terms of threat level, aggressive when disturbed and fast enough that running wasn't a reliable option once it had locked onto a target. Mobe responded correctly, drawing the beast's attention, holding ground, buying time for the others to establish better positioning. This was exactly what B-grade talent combined with genuine field training looked like under real pressure. Decisive, controlled, oriented toward the group rather than personal survival, Dandeer pressure. Chi Chen panicked, not in a visible dramatic way, but the panic showed in his technique. The specific tells of a cultivator whose actual foundation was much shallower than their stated rank. He executed a Gu combination that should have been well within a B-grade second-month cultivator's capability, and the execution failed. The timing was off. The essence output was wrong. The combination fell apart. The beast swung toward Chi Chen immediately, sensing the weakness in his technique. Mobe was already committed to the other angle and couldn't cover both positions simultaneously, and Chi Chen ran. Wrong decision tactically, and worse than that, it revealed to anyone watching carefully that his reported capability and his actual capability were 2 entirely different things. I was watching from my position at the edge of the group, and I knew exactly what I was looking at. A student whose real talent had just been exposed by the one thing training can't always compensate for. I stepped into the gap Chi Chen had left, brought the beast's attention to me, and ran it through misdirections that kept it cycling until the elder arrived to handle the elimination. The elder was pleased with the outcome. He noted in his assessment report that Fang Yuan had shown unexpected composure under pressure and efficient technique given his grade level. The elder noted that Chi Chen had shown concerning gaps in his execution under real field conditions, which was accurate, carefully worded, and stopped exactly one conclusion short of the truth. Da'el conditions. He did not note what those gaps actually implied. Either he didn't see it, or he saw it and decided that wasn't a conclusion he was going to reach officially without more evidence. I noted it, filed it away under Chi Chen's name in the comprehensive index I was building of everyone around me and what I actually knew about them versus what they wanted to be known. That evening I found Mobe sitting alone at the edge of the training grounds, cleaning his Gu equipment with the methodical focus of someone who uses physical tasks to think. I sat down nearby, not close enough to be intrusive, just present in the space, letting him decide whether to acknowledge me or not. He looked at me sideways after a moment. Me sideways. We hadn't spoken much before this. No obvious reason for a B grade and a C grade student to spend time together, and Mobe's grandfather had opinions about associations that might reflect on his investment. That was good positioning earlier, Mobe said finally. Not a compliment exactly, more like an accurate observation stated neutrally. You held it long enough to make positioning possible, I said. That was the harder part. He considered this, nodded once, the way people nod when they don't want to agree but have to admit the point is accurate. We sat in silence for a while, the mountain wind moving through the bamboo above us, the training ground settling into evening quiet around the sounds of other students heading back toward the village. Chi Chen, Mobe said eventually. Just the name. A question with no question mark. I don't know what you're asking, I said. He looked at me with the direct assessment of someone who had been trained to evaluate what was in front of him and call it what it was. Yes, you do. A pause. Some things, I said carefully, choosing each word with precision, are worth knowing but not worth saying. At least not yet, and not in the wrong room. Mobe was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his equipment and stood. My grandfather thinks you're a waste of space, he said, not unkindly, as a piece of information. Your grandfather's opinion of me is probably an asset at this point, I said. Low expectations are one of the more useful things a person can have working in their favor. Moed. Mobe actually smiled at that. Small, controlled. The smile of someone who found something genuinely amusing but wasn't going to let it go further than that. He walked away without another word. That was the beginning of something I didn't have a name for. Not friendship. We didn't have enough common ground for that yet, and the clan's internal politics made easy alliance complicated. But a kind of mutual recognition that the other person was paying closer attention than they were letting on. In a world where most people underestimate you, finding someone who doesn't is worth more than it sounds. 6 months after the awakening ceremony, and the two records I was keeping, the official one and the real one, had never diverged more sharply than they did right now. My official record, rank 2, early stage, a clean advancement from the previous month's assessment, consistent with a C-grade student who had been working steadily. The elders noted it without comment. This was exactly the kind of progress a C-grade student was supposed to make. My actual status, rank 2, peak stage, one threshold away from rank 3. The monk's technique had compressed what should have been a year of advancement into something considerably faster, running clean and efficient through the C-grade aperture's limits without wasting a drop of essence. One more month, maybe slightly less, and I would cross into rank 3. Once I was there, the mountain was navigable. The dangers that had been theoretical would become real, and I would be equipped to handle them rather than avoid them. The inheritance situation had also been quietly progressing. I'd spent 2 evenings at the clan records office, available to all clan members during specified hours, reviewing the official documentation of my parents' estate. The records keeper was an older man named Gu Yuefeng, 30 years in the role with the detached professionalism of someone who'd seen enough inheritance disputes to stop taking any of them personally. I had approached him with the carefully calibrated helplessness of a 15-year-old who was confused about some documentation and wanted to understand his situation better. He had explained the relevant clan laws with the patient thoroughness of a man who genuinely liked his job. What I learned confirmed what I'd suspected. The assets had not been moved, still registered, still tied to my parents' names, still subject to the inheritance provisions that would transfer to me at 16. They hadn't touched them. What they had done was file a series of quiet objections to my status as heir, small procedural challenges, the kind that didn't change the outcome on their own but could create delays. Each one required a response. Each response required a filing. And the filing process had a cost in both time and the kind of clan political capital that a 15-year-old C-grade student without family connections was not supposed to have. It was a reasonable strategy for people who understood the administrative system and expected the 15-year-old opposite them to be ignorant of the tools available to respond. It would have succeeded in my first life, where I'd been too angry and too ignorant of the administrative landscape to navigate it effectively. This time I spent a third evening at the records office, drafting responses to every objection. 3 historical precedents, exact dates, exact case numbers, technically airtight.es to every outstanding objection. Gu Yuefeng helped me with the formatting, maintaining his professional neutrality, but I caught something in his expression when he read through what I'd written. A kind of quiet reassessment. "You've done some research," Gu Yuefeng said carefully, reading through what I'd written with the measured attention of someone reassessing a situation. "I had time," I said. All 7 objections were responded to and filed by the end of the third evening. The responses were technically airtight. I had cross-referenced 3 separate precedents from the clan's historical records and cited them with exact dates and case numbers. The responses would sit in review for 30 days. After that, they would either be upheld or require further contest, and any further contest would need to escalate to the elders, which was a level of exposure my aunt and uncle had been trying to avoid. I walked out of the records office into the evening air and thought about the look on my aunt's face when she received the notification of the filed responses. Then I stopped thinking about it because it didn't change anything I needed to do next. And sentiment about other people's reactions was a form of self-indulgence I'd worked hard to dismantle. In the 7th month, I crossed into rank 3. I was sitting in the cave when it happened, in the same cross-legged position the flower wine monk had occupied at the end of his life. Sitting cross-legged in the same position the flower wine monk had occupied at the end of his life, working through the final stages of a circulation cycle that had been building for 2 weeks. The threshold crossing was quiet. No visible light, no sound, no dramatic shift in the cave air. Just the internal sensation of a door opening that had been closed for a long time, hiffed in the air around me. Just the internal sensation of a door opening, the aperture expanding, the primeval sea rising to a new waterline, the essence itself shifting 1 tier upward in quality and density. Rank 3. C-grade capacity maxed. The ceiling I'd been given at birth reached in 7 months rather than the years it should have taken. I sat in the cave for an hour afterward and did nothing except breathe and let the new state settle through the aperture, the primeval sea finding its new waterline without interference. The flower wine monk's bones were 10 feet away. His inheritance was living in my aperture and my memory. The liquor worm he had once cultivated had been absorbed into my own vital goo's lineage. In a sense, I was the continuation of something he'd started 3 centuries ago, the custodian of a path he'd built and then been unable to walk any further. It was a strange kind of company, but it was company. I had one more thing to collect from the cave before I was done with it. The monk's most advanced goo, a technique-type goo called the spring scissors, which required rank 3 as a minimum activation threshold. I'd known it was here from the moment I entered the cave, sitting in its sealed container at the back of the space, waiting. I retrieved it. The refinement took 3 hours and most of my remaining reserves, but when it was done, the spring scissors settled into my aperture with the distinct solidity of a high-quality goo finding its master. I sat in the dark with my eyes closed and felt the shape of everything I had accumulated. Stacked and cataloged, a foundation that shouldn't exist in a 15-year-old C-grade body. Rank 3 cultivation, the liquor worm, 6 cave goo at various stages. The spring scissors, the monk's complete technique library stored in memory. 3 secret cultivation channels still producing. Inheritance claim in process. Monthly assessment performance managed to rank 2, early stage. The gap between who I appeared to be and who I actually was had never been wider. Good. 16 days before my 16th birthday, my aunt and uncle made their final move. Something I hadn't fully anticipated, which meant it was at least more creative than what had come before. It wasn't the assault scheme. They'd abandoned that after the first failure. It wasn't the administrative objections, which were losing traction in review. It was something I hadn't fully anticipated, which meant it was at least more creative than what they'd tried before. They went to the clan elders with a welfare concern. They cited erratic behavior, night-wandering drinking, sleeping through classes, and expressed concern that I was not in a sound state to manage a significant inheritance. They requested a guardian. They requested that the Elder Council appoint a guardian administrator to manage the estate until I could demonstrate stability and competence. This was legally possible. The clan had a guardian mechanism precisely for situations where a young heir was deemed incapable of responsible management. And every piece of evidence they cited was real. The night wandering, the drinking, the classroom behavior. I had constructed that evidence myself without thinking about this specific use of it. I had constructed that evidence deliberately over the preceding months without thinking about this specific use of it. I had built a better cover story than I'd realized, and my aunt and uncle had found the edge of it. I spent the day of the Elder Council meeting sitting in my room thinking. This was an unexpected variable, and I needed to be honest with myself about how well positioned I actually was to counter it. The legal standard for appointing a guardian administrator was demonstrable concern for heir competency. The evidence they had was circumstantial but not weak. The ruling elders included Chi Lian, who had reasons of his own to want my resources redirected, and Mo Chen, whose opinion of me had shifted, but not enough to rely on unconditionally. I needed to appear at that meeting, and I needed to appear as someone whose competency was unquestionable. I also needed to do it without revealing anything I'd been keeping hidden. The meeting was in 2 days. I had spent 7 months becoming something that looked like nothing. Now I needed to show just enough of what I actually was to close this particular door without opening 10 others. I stood up, went to the window, looked out at the mountain that had held me for 7 months, and made some decisions. The Elder Council met in the Clan Pavilion's upper chamber, a formal space reserved for governance matters, with carved wooden chairs arranged in a semicircle in a central position for the person being addressed. I arrived before the session opened and stood in the hallway watching people file in, taking note of expressions and postures and the small signals that told me where each person stood. My aunt and uncle came early, wearing their best formal robes, accompanied by an elder I didn't recognize, a procedural witness they'd arranged in advance. Mobe's grandfather, Elder Mo Chen, passed me in the hallway and gave me a long, unreadable look that ended in a very slight nod. I noted it and said nothing. Elder Chi Lian arrived last, as high-status people often do, and did not look at me at all, which was in its own way informative. The session opened. My aunt and uncle presented their case with the organized thoroughness of people who had rehearsed it. The night wandering, the drinking, the academic performance, the general impression of a young man unable to manage himself, let alone a significant estate. They were not lying. Every piece of evidence was real. That was the most technically impressive part of the whole thing. The presiding elder, not Chi Lian, a neutral party named Elder Gu Yuefei, turned to me and asked if I had a response. I did. I had prepared the response with the same care I'd given to the monthly assessment performances, knowing exactly what to show, exactly what to keep back, exactly how much was required and not one measure more. I addressed the drinking charge first. Yes, I had been purchasing wine regularly. The wine had been used as a goo attractant technique during night scouting runs on the mountain. I had also been using the wine aroma as a goo attractant technique during night scouting exercises that had resulted in the discovery and refinement of a non-standard vital goo. I produced the liquor worm. Let it manifest visibly in my palm for the first time in 7 months, glowing warm amber, deeply refined. Clearly not the moonlight goo every other student carried. The chamber went quiet in a specific way. I responded to the sleeping in class charge next. I had been maintaining a nighttime cultivation schedule that left me fatigued during daytime instruction. The results of that schedule were available in my cultivation record. Though the record was slightly behind my actual progress, I offered to submit to direct examination. Elder Mo Chen, without being asked, spoke up and said he would conduct the examination himself. Nobody objected. He placed his hand on my shoulder, extended his primeval sense into my aperture, and spent 30 seconds in complete silence with an expression that gave nothing away. When he removed his hand, his expression was careful and completely controlled. "The heir's cultivation foundation is sound," he said. "More than sound." That was all he said, but it was enough. Elder Chi Lian's expression had gone flat in the way that meant he was recalculating. The presiding elder looked at my aunt and uncle, then at me, then at the documentation, filed responses, cultivation record, brief account of the channel discovery, and made a long note. The guardian administrator request was declined. The presiding elder noted that the heir had demonstrated sound cultivation foundation and competent management of his own affairs. Case closed. My aunt looked at me with an expression that had moved through several things and arrived at something I could only describe as reluctant acknowledgement. My uncle looked at the table. I nodded politely to the presiding elder, thanked Elder Mo Chen with exactly the degree of warmth appropriate for the situation, genuine but measured, and walked out of the chamber into the corridor. The mountain air came in through an open window at the end of the hall, carrying pine and cold stone and the faint smell of something growing at the edges of the paths outside. 16 days. Then the inheritance was mine. The legal claim was complete, and I could start moving at the speed this world actually required. My 16th birthday arrived on a morning that looked like every other morning. Gray sky, mountain mist, the sound of the stream on the north face audible from my window. The inheritance transfer was completed by noon. Gu Yuefeng handled the documentation with professional calm, stamping the final papers with the clan seal and handing me the copy with a look that might, on a less controlled face, have been admiration. My parents' estate, primeval stones, property rights, cultivation resources, Gu, everything they had accumulated in their careers before the mission that had ended both their lives when I was 3 years old. It was not a fortune by the standards of the great families in the Central Plains or the powerful sects further south. But on Qingmao Mountain, among the Guyue clan, it was enough to make a considerable difference. I sat in my room that evening and looked at the numbers and thought about my parents for the first time in a while. Not with grief. I'd had 500 years to process grief, but with something quieter. An acknowledgement that the path they'd walked had made this moment possible, that their resources were going to serve a purpose they couldn't have imagined when they acquired them. Then I stopped thinking about my parents and started thinking about what came next, because this moment was a threshold, and what mattered now was how I moved through it. Because this, all of this, the 7 months, the cave, the channels, the inheritance, the careful performance of mediocrity, none of it was the destination. It was the foundation, the starting position. The real world was out there beyond Qingmao Mountain, its players, its disasters, its hidden treasures and dangerous geniuses, and it was moving on schedule, exactly as I remembered. The history I carried in my memory was unfolding without me, and there were moments in that history, opportunities, treasures, critical junctures, that I needed to be positioned for before they arrived. I had rank 3 cultivation, a rank 5 technique library, a vital goo that communicated with dozens of species, and enough resources to move without depending on anyone else's support. For a 15-year-old C-grade student from a mountain village, that was genuinely nothing. For a 500-year-old demon reborn with foreknowledge of the next 5 centuries, it was more than enough to start. I thought about what the elders would say in the morning when the routine assessment revealed that Fang Yuan had advanced further than anyone had been tracking. I thought about my brother, looking at the same numbers and understanding for the first time that the older brother he'd been quietly sorry for was something else entirely. I thought about the world outside the mountain, its dangers, its opportunities, its players who didn't know I was coming. Then I picked up the wine jar on the table, drank what was left in it, and started writing the first entry in what would become the most detailed record of a cultivator's strategic planning that this era had ever seen. A demon is merciless, a demon is patient, a demon plays the long game and wins. I had already won on Qingmao Mountain. Nobody knew it yet. They would.